VP, Business Development, tell us more on one of Africa's most exciting companies. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jerry. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to continue on the Africa theme. Our company is listed in Toronto and Oslo. We have a sister company, Horn Petroleum. Horn is focused in on Somalia, and Africa Oil is focused in on just Kenya and Ethiopia. Our market share has gone from $250 million to $2.2 billion in about 6 months. And this morning I'm going to show you why that's the case. We've opened up a new basin. We drilled a well with our partner Tullow called Gamia in Kenya. But before I start in on that, I want to show you really the magnitude of our acreage position. If you take the map on the left there, you see our blocks in red that cover the tertiary play and the Cretaceous play in Kenya and Ethiopia. If you superimpose those on the Norwegian North Sea Graben and the English portion, the Danish portion, what you can see is our position covers all the way from the northern end of the North Sea Graben down to the southern gas basin. And equally important, in the North Sea there's been about 2,400 wells drilled and about 60 billion barrels of oil found. In our trend, only 10 wells have been drilled, so it's highly underexplored. And our first well right out of the chute was a big discovery. We started picking up the acreage in 2005. I was going down into Kenya and Ethiopia at that time with Lundin Petroleum. We assembled this position across 4 different geologic realms. They're color-coded here. The gold color is the tertiary play where we made the discovery, Gamia. The green is the Cretaceous play that connects back into Sudan, where there's 6 billion barrels of oil discovered. The light blue is the Jurassic play that was once contiguous with Yemen, where there again is 6 billion barrels, and that darker blue is an older Permo-Triassic play. We've picked up now 300,000 square kilometers, which is about 74 million acres. We feel like we're at the crossroads here with Uganda looking for a port to export their oil, South Sudan looking for a place to bring their oil. Now we have this discovery in Kenya. We think this will be an interesting time for the next few years in East Africa. You're seeing major companies now scrambling for positions in this area. We've essentially completed our farm-out programs. We brought in Tullow into both the Cretaceous and the tertiary play. We just recently signed a deal with Marathon. Marathon's coming in to 2 blocks in Kenya and 1 in Ethiopia. Previously, we've done several deals with smaller companies, Afrin and New Age, Red Emperor. We've spun off Horn Petroleum for the Somalia assets. We're still looking for a few minor partners in 2 blocks in Ethiopia and in Puntland, Somalia. Now it's time to drill. We've taken the Weatherford rig, operated by Tullow, and drilled the Gamia discovery in Block 10BB. That rig was moved over to Twiga South, and it's currently drilling there. We should have some information towards the end of October. And then finally it'll go to a prospect called Kongoni. We brought in 2 additional rigs. The Egyptian Saxon rig is now on a prospect called Pai Pai, I'll show you. We brought in a 3rd rig, a Polish rig, OGEC. It's going to go up into South Omo block of Ethiopia and drill the Sabisa well early December of this year. We've talked with Tullow about bringing in additional rigs if we continue our success. We're talking with Tullow about sharing these rigs for blocks that we operate. Let's start with the tertiary play, which is our most exciting play with this discovery, Gamia. We've got 2 trends here that we want to focus in on. We call them the string of pearls, the southern string and the northern string. And the reason we use that term is that each prospect itself is a nice pearl, but collectively they make a nice necklace, meaning a potentially commercial project. So they're not big enough in their own right to make a commercial project, but we think collectively they will. So we're going to take a look first at that southern string of pearls. You can see on the map here, this is Lake Turkana, and the border with Ethiopia is here, and this is all Kenya. If you look at the map on the left, again, it just shows you a location. We're going to zero in on what's called the Lokichar sub-basin. There's a series of these small sub-basins that are breaking apart today along the East African Rift. We zero in on that area on the map in the center. You can see where we've drilled the Gamia discovery. This is a seismic line that essentially runs up the trend of these string of pearls here. So we drilled Gamia here, and now we're on the Twiga South prospect. I think what you can see is that these structures all have a similarity. They're all closures against a rift-bounding fault. They all have good closure in the strike sense. In the dip sense, they close against this fault. So we're hoping that Twiga South is going to be similar to Gamia, and all these prospects here are going to be similar to Gamia. This is a little different style of map. This is a depth structure map. What you can see here in blue is where the basin is deep. That's essentially where the source rock is cooking. We call it the kitchen. So we know oil has been generated. We know oil has migrated up into Lopero discovery drilled by Shell in 1992. We know we've got oil at Gamia that we just drilled March of this year. We know there's oil seeping on the edge of the basin over here. So essentially all these prospects in the Lokichar sub-basin have been de-risked. Source rock is there, the oil is generating, it's migrating. We can check that box. That basin itself is about the same size as the Albert Graben of Uganda. So if we look at Gamia, this was our play opener. Very successful well. It exceeded all our expectations. You can see on the seismic that essentially the closure is up against these bounding faults, and then in the north-south direction, it's a nice closure. We've recently done a resource report with an independent audit company. And these numbers I'm going to be showing you are from that report, the risk numbers and the recoverable contingent resources and prospective resources. The audit report has essentially taken Gamia, which was discovered here, and this is the overall structure, and split it into contingent resources and prospective resources. And in a best case, you can take that 51 plus 137, that's 188 million barrels, this number we're carrying currently for Gamia. The chance of success is 62%, very high. This is what we found at Gamia. The oil came in quite shallow, surprised us. We went into this prospect with a best estimate of 17 meters of oil pay. We ended up with 100. In addition, we think we have 43 additional meters in the deeper section. So it was quite a surprise, quite a pleasant surprise for us. We recovered oil to surface in 5 different zones. The oil quality is good. It's 30 to 38 API. It is a waxy crude, like Uganda and like South Sudan. We think there's a lot of upside still in the lower section. We went through and found 43 meters of what we think is pay there. So the focus now is going to be on trying to prove up some deeper horizons in Gamia over the next few years. We've moved the rig now to Twiga South, and we're currently drilling there. And like I said, we should have results towards the end of October on Twiga. The numbers here from the audit report, best estimate case, about 59 million barrels recoverable. Very high chance of success because we've proved up that source rock in this sub-basin. We know it's working. We'll then move the rig likely to Congoni. Congoni, once again, it looks like all the other prospects. It's a rift-bounding closure, and it's got a nice strike roll, and it has similar size, 64 million barrels, best case estimate. On the eastern side of the basin, there's 2 more structures that are quite different. These are more conventional tilted rift blocks. One's called Kamba and one's called Lopero. Lopero is the discovery that Shell drilled in 1992, but we think there's some deeper section here that's available that Shell did not penetrate. And notice the best estimate cases for these is quite large. We're looking at over 200 million barrels for each of these, and a very high chance of success at 34%. Now we're going to jump all the way to the north up into southern Ethiopia. This is the South Omo block. We hold 30%, with Tullow operating at 50%. We think the same play extends up into Ethiopia. This is all part of the East African Rift. This block had no exploration at all, no seismic, no drilling, nothing. We came in here and shot 1,000 kilometers in the western part of the basin, just north of Lake Turkana. And now we've got a seismic crew in the east part shooting about 500 kilometers. We've got a prospect called Sabisa, and sure enough, it looks like Gamia. Looks like Twiga South. It has a closure that closes against this bounding rift fault. You can see it here in the dip seismic line, and you can see a nice roll in the strike horn. Prospect is a little bigger, 68 million barrels in the best case. And the chance of success a little bit lower because now we haven't proved the source rock up in this part of the trend. And then we drop down to Lake Turkana proper in Block 10BA. We hold 50% here. This lake is covered with oil slicks, natural oil sheens emanating from the subsurface. We've shot full tensor gradiometric gravity. We're now currently shooting seismic. We've finished our onshore seismic. We're now moving out to the offshore. There's a lot of bigger structures here. This one looks like it could have the lion's share of our resources. We'll probably drill here in the second half of 2013. Now we're going to jump over to the older Cretaceous rift trend. This is the trend that is coming out of Sudan. It has a proven reserves in Sudan about 6 billion barrels. And the same geology continues on into Kenya, goes through this Anza Graben and out to Lamu. We've got plans to drill 2 wells here. One is Pai Pai. The rig is set up now on Pai Pai. We'll spud towards the end of this month. And then we'll eventually drill a well in Block 9 that we operate, probably called Kinyanga. This is a seismic line and a map over Pai Pai. Pai Pai is a 4-way closed structure. It doesn't look like it has the same problem that the previous wells that were drilled in the 80s have, and that is rejuvenation of the faults and leakage of the oil. Pai Pai seems to have sat there in a stable position. So we're going to test this prospect. Chance of success is pretty low, 10%, but it has a best case of 120 million barrels and an upside of over 300 million barrels. And similarly, in Block 9, we have a very large structure, Kinyanga. Chance of success is a little bit higher at 19%. The best estimate here is over 300 million barrels with an upside of almost 700 million barrels. This will be drilled second half of next year. Marathon has joined us in this block. And then finally, we'll take a look at the Jurassic play. Our blocks in Puntland region of Somalia were once contiguous with Yemen. Yemen, there's about 6 billion barrels of oil proven up. We use a company here called Horn Petroleum. Horn is owned by Africa Oil at 45%. It's also listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange. We successfully drilled 2 wells here over the last year and a half, which wasn't an easy feat. But unfortunately, we didn't find what we were hoping to find. We found lots of indications of oil. It looks like it's residual. It looks like these structures had some movement on them after migration and charge that has breached these structures. So we're taking a step back here, scratch our head and figure out what to do next. But we've gone into the second period for both these blocks. We've committed to drilling. We'll now probably shoot some regional gravity and some seismic and see what other prospects we can find in this trend. As I mentioned, we've done this resource report recently. It came out with excellent news. We've increased our gross prospective resources by 142% and our net by 128%. This is mostly due to these new blocks that had no data. South Omo, 12A, 13T had no seismic data before. Now we're taking that new data and seeing all kinds of prospects and leads. Just in the tertiary trend alone, we have 100 prospects and leads identified. In this report also, the chance of success is elevated in the Lokichar subbasin from generally 14% up to now averaging 34% because of the Gamia discovery. So our total risk net prospective resources is now over 1 billion barrels of oil. That's just Kenya and Ethiopia. This slide breaks it down per block. The handouts are here. You can look at these in more detail. But what you can see is that some of the blocks have the lion's share, like 10BA is the one on Lake Turkana. There it's got an unrisked net best estimate of almost 5 billion barrels. So if you look at the total there for just Kenya and Ethiopia, we're looking at a risked net of about a little over 1 billion barrels of oil. If you try to put some value on that, Again, look at the numbers where Kenya and Ethiopia is about 10.7 billion barrels of oil.